Princess Kayla bought the human prisoner because everyone at the auction told her not to. He stood alone on the black stone platform, wrists locked in gravity chains, neck circled by a punishment collar, shirt torn enough to show old scars crossing newer bruises. And still the market masters kept a cannon pointed at his chest. That should have told her something, but Kalira was 17 days from losing her throne, 6 months from burying her father, and too tired of men with perfect robes explaining which lives were worth saving. The auctioneer called him a Terran war captive, unsorted, unranked, possibly dangerous. Suitable for labor, arena disposal, or ceremonial execution. And the crowd laughed because the human looked nothing like the monsters in old Imperial warnings. He was broad-shouldered but not giant, gray-eyed but not burning, bearded but not savage, exhausted in the way prisoners become when pain has stopped being surprising. Princess Kalira watched him lift his head once, just once, when a child in the front row began crying. And in that small movement, she saw something the market had missed. Her advisor, Lord Merivin, touched her sleeve and whispered, "Do not involve yourself, Highness. Humans are expensive trouble. The northern houses already call you impulsive." Kylira looked at the prisoner again, at the cannon, at the collar, at the market guards who stood too far away from him, and raised her bidding crystal, "Then I will purchase trouble before my enemies do." The human did not thank her when the hammer fell. He did not bow when her seal was stamped onto the ownership writ. He did not flinch when the market master unlocked his platform chains and replaced them with royal restraints. He simply looked at Kalira as if she had not bought him at all, as if she had stepped into a war already moving. Lord Merivin sneered and told the guards to keep the beast muzzled. The human's eyes shifted to him, calm, almost bored. And Merivin stopped smiling without knowing why. Kylira hated the writ in her hand. Hated that her father's empire still permitted debtor markets on treaty moons. Hated that the law called this purchase mercy, because the alternative bidders wore arena colors. She walked beside the prisoner through the market corridor while merchants offered her venom pets. Memory spices, crystal dancers, captured poets, and relic weapons that had probably killed better people than their owners. And yet the hired escorts gave him space the way soldiers give space to unstable reactors. Kalira finally said, "What is your name?" He answered after a pause, "Rowan Vale." His voice was rough. Quiet, ordinary. She expected a curse, a plea. Perhaps the theatrical hatred humans were famous for in border stories. Instead, he asked, "Are those your guards?" She glanced at the 6 armored palace escorts around them. "Yes." He looked ahead. "Then 2 of them planned to betray you before sunrise." That was the first mistake. She thought she had purchased a helpless man. When she had purchased the memory of war itself, Kalira stopped walking. The market noise seemed to pull away from her ears. Lord Merivin barked a laugh, an amusing trick, prisoner. Accuse loyal men and hope the soft princess removes your collar. Rowan did not look at him. The tall guard on the left carries his rifle too high because he expects close work. The rear guard has disabled his external recorder. Your captain keeps touching the right side of her helmet because she is waiting for a private signal. And the one with the silver plume has not looked at you once. Highness, only at the auction exits, Kalira felt the temperature drop inside her skin. Captain Sira, her chief escort, stiffened, offended, but her eyes flicked once involuntarily. To the right side of her helmet, Rowan gave a tired sigh. There it is. The attack came before anyone could answer. Silver plume spun, rifle rising toward Kalira's back. The rear guard drew a curved knife from beneath Imperial armor, and Captain Sira shouted too late. Rowan moved first, chains and all. He stepped behind Kalira, pulled her down with one bound wrist, and let the rifle shot pass over both their heads into a hanging cage of glass birds. The birds exploded into screaming shards. The knife guard lunged. Rowan caught the blade between his chained wrists, twisted, and drove the man's own shoulder into a pillar hard enough to crack stone. Silver Plume tried to fire again, but Rowan kicked a fallen auction bowl into his knee, took one step through the collapsing guard line, and struck him in the throat with the restraint bar between his cuffs. precise, silent, merciless, only inefficiency. 3 seconds later, 2 traders lay choking. One lay unconscious. Captain Sierra had her pistol out, the market screamed, and Rowan was back on his knees because the collar had punished his movement with a surge of red lightning. His jaw clenched, but he made no sound. Kalira stared at him at the smoke above her shoulder. At the traders wearing her own colors, and realized she was still alive because a chained prisoner had chosen to fall before she did. Lord Maravan recovered first, as politicians often do when courage is no longer required. "Seize him!" he shouted. He attacked royal guards. Rowan looked up at Kalira, not pleading, not demanding. Simply waiting to see what sort of ruler she was when fear had fresh evidence, Captain Sierra said. "Highness, those 2 were on my roster for 3 years, I would have sworn." Kalira heard shame in the captain's voice and something worse in Maravan's breathing. Satisfaction interrupted, she turned to the market master. "I require a private room, medical restraint keys, and the full names of every bidder who offered for this human." The market master bowed until his antennae scraped the floor. "As you command," Princess Morovin stepped close. Lowering his voice, "Kalira, this creature is manipulating you." He saw a threat because he knew violence. "No," Kalira said. "He saw a threat because he knew the room. There is a difference." She ordered Rowan's punishment collar, powered down but not removed, a compromise that tasted like ash. Then had him escorted to her shuttle under guards so nervous they held their rifles like prayer sticks. During the flight back to Varath Prime, Kalira sat across from him in the dim hold. The traders locked unconscious inside capsules. Captain Sierra, standing near the door with humiliation burning behind her visor. Rowan's hands remained chained. His shoulders smote from the collar burn. And still his gaze kept traveling. Vents, hinges, guard positions, window reflection. "Engine vibration," Kalira asked. "Were you a soldier?" he said. "Once what rank?" The smallest pause, Infantry Morovin, laughed from the opposite bench. "Infantry do not read assassination patterns like court ledgers." Rowan turned his head. "Some infantry survive long enough to learn." Kalira's palace rose from the ocean cliffs like a crown made by storms. White towers, blue banners, windows bright with late evening fire, and below it, the capital city curved along the black coast, beautiful enough to make betrayal feel obscene. Her father had loved that view, Emperor Theron, the patient, who believed reforms could be negotiated with men who profited from cruelty. Then fever took him, or poison dressed as fever, and Kalira inherited a throne whose legs had already been sawed halfway through. The Iron League pressed the northern border. House Thornvale withheld taxes. House Maravan offered support with marriage hooks hidden inside every proposal. And now her own guards had tried to sell her death inside a market corridor. She ordered Rowan placed not in a dungeon, but in the old guest barracks beneath the western tower. Guarded, locked, treated by a medic, Kalira ignored them all. That night she visited the barracks in a plain cloak, against every protocol, with Sierra outside the door and a small shock pistol hidden in her sleeve. Rowan sat on the floor instead of the bed, back to the corner, hands loose in his lap. The punishment collar was gone, replaced by a royal tracker around his left wrist. He looked up when she entered. "Highness," she said. "You lied about your rank." "Yes." The honesty struck harder than denial would have. "Why?" "Because ranks make people stupid. They either obey the rank, fear it, worship it, or try to prove it cannot command them. I needed to know who you were before you knew who I had been." Kalira folded her arms. "And who am I?" Rowan studied her. "A young ruler surrounded by old knives, still angry enough to be decent, still decent enough to be in danger." Asterisk, asterisk, the words cut through her more cleanly than insult. She should have punished him for the familiarity. But instead she found herself sitting on the opposite bench. Suddenly exhausted, the traders named a northern paymaster before they died. She said poison capsules in their teeth. "House Thornvale?" Rowan asked. Kalira frowned. "How did you—" "Their emblem was etched under Silverplume's rifle grip. You noticed that while chained and being electrocuted." He shrugged slightly. "Pain does not improve observation, but it makes missing details expensive." She breathed out, What were you really, Rowan? Looked at the locked door. Then the sea darkening beyond the narrow window, something my people no longer needed. That is not an answer. It is the gentlest one. Highness, she felt anger rise, not at him, at walls, titles, markets. All the systems that made truth something people rationed. I bought you, she said, regretting the words before they fully left her mouth. So I could keep you from the arena, but the law says you are mine. Tell me what I have brought into my palace. Rowan's face did not change. Yet the room seemed to draw a breath around him. A prisoner, he said, then quieter, and a battlefield that learned to walk. Then the prisoner looked at the palace map, and every general in the room became unnecessary. The War Council laughed at him the next morning. Because nobles are rarely more confident than when they are wrong in groups. Kalera had summoned her generals, ministers, house observers, and the shackled human to the Azure Strategy Chamber. General Arkov, commander of the Royal Army, looked at Rowan with open disgust. Why is the purchased animal in my council? Kalera said. Because the purchased animal noticed 2 assassins before 6 royal guards did, so perhaps he will notice something our paid geniuses missed. A few younger officers hid smiles. Arkov did not. Rowan stood beside the map, in borrowed black fatigues. Wrist tracker glowing, no insignia, no weapon. His expression carefully empty. The map showed Iron League forces massing beyond the Illyrian Pass. Kalera had heard the briefing 10 times. They would strike the pass, break the fortress line, descend into the capital plains, and House Thornvale would rebel at the rear. Rowan listened without moving. Then he asked, why would they use the pass? Arkov blinked. Because armies require roads. The human pointed at the red mass. They want you to think that their walkers are too clean. No mud scoring, no cold damage, no fuel stacks. Their air wings are placed for visibility, not range. That is not an invasion posture. It is theater, Maravan sniffed. The prisoner claims 100,000 soldiers are props. Rowan said, no, I claim 60,000 are props. 40,000 are already moving elsewhere. The chamber chilled into silence. Rowan reached toward the map, stopped when the guards raised weapons, and looked at Kalera permission. She nodded. He touched the eastern coast, a chain of fishing towns beneath quiet cliffs. There, Arkov laughed. The eastern cliffs are impassable. Rowan dragged 2 fingers through the projected sea. Not from below, from above. Drop barges masked inside the storm shelf. Infantry gliders under cloud cover, sabotage teams landing before dawn. They do not need the pass. They need the pass watched. Kalera felt her pulse climb. That coast leads to the capital reservoirs. Yes, Rowan said. Poison the reservoirs. Trigger panic, Thornvale rises. Iron League offers order. You become a tragic child monarch saved by foreign discipline, or killed resisting it. Morovin went pale for half a heartbeat before outrage painted him again. Absurd, General Arkov said. We have no evidence. Rowan looked at the map's weather layer. You have all the evidence. You filed it under inconvenience. 3 fishing lights went dark last night. Storm gull migrations shifted south. Merchant traffic rerouted without royal order. And your eastern weather balloons are reporting perfect conditions during a magnetic squall, which means they are no longer your weather balloons. Kalera turned to Arkov. Is that true? The general hesitated. Each item separately was minor. Together, she said. Arkov looked older. Together, it is possible, Rowan corrected gently. Together, it is already happening. By sunset, scouts confirmed shadow movement over the eastern sea. By moonrise, Kalera's army began moving in secret. Not toward the famous pass, but toward the forgotten cliffs no noble ballad had ever praised. Rowan did not command, not officially. Kalera gave orders through Arkov, who hated every word until the reports proved the human right. Fishing families were evacuated, reservoir gates sealed, false lights arranged along empty roads, glider traps set between wind towers. The palace hummed with fear, sharpened into work. Kalera found Rowan in the Western Tower Armory, studying obsolete rifles from her grandfather's rebellion. He had removed 3 from the racks and rebuilt them into something ugly and functional. Sira stood nearby watching as if he were a dangerous storm she had been assigned to supervise. Kalira said, "You claimed infantry, Rowan," did not look up. "Infantry use whatever still fires," Sira asked. "How many battlefields did you survive?" He answered, "Too many." Kalira stepped closer. "How many did you command?" The rifle parts clicked together in his hands. He said nothing. And in that silence, she heard the shape of armies. The door opened. Lord Meravin entered with 2 clerks and a smile. "Too careful to be honest, Highness. The Council requires reassurance that the human will not be allowed near strategic command channels." "Naturally," Kalira said, "and perhaps for public trust. He should be returned to secure containment after this crisis." Rowan finally looked up. "The Eastern attack is not the crisis." Merivan's smile froze. "What does that mean?" Rowan placed the finished rifle on the table. "It means Thornvale is bait. The Iron League is a knife. But someone inside this palace is holding the hand." His eyes moved to Merivan's rings, one black, one silver. One newly polished over a faint red stain. Kalira saw it too. The room became very quiet. Merovin withdrew with perfect court dignity, and Sira whispered, "We should arrest him." Rowan shook his head. "Not yet." "Why?" Kalira asked. "Because if you catch one spider, the web pretends it was never there. The Empire had bought his chains, but the battlefield remembered his crown." The Eastern invasion began at Third Bell. Exactly where Rowan said it would, the sky opened without thunder. Black glider shapes descending through storm cloud. Silent engines carrying Iron League soldiers toward the reservoir cliffs, but no sleeping towns waited beneath them. No undefended water gates, no panicked villagers. Only darkness, empty roofs, and then royal floodlights igniting all at once, turning the rain silver. Kalira watched from a command balcony above the Eastern operations room as the first enemy. Waves slammed into invisible cables strung between wind towers. Gliders folded, soldiers dropped into cushioned capture nets, or shattered against the rocks if they cut loose too late. Royal artillery, hidden under fishing tarps, fired net shells. Instead of explosives, because Rowan said prisoners spoke louder than corpses, General Arkov barked orders with reluctant admiration. Captain Sira coordinated evacuation lanes. Young officers ran messages, and Rowan stood behind Kalira like a prisoner's shadow. Yet every few minutes his quiet voice changed everything. "Move the 3rd Reserve before the smoke. Turn the south beacon off. They are steering by false stars. Do not chase that retreat. It wants you under their air wing. Cut the reservoir road now, not later." He never raised his voice, and the army began to lean toward him the way grass leans toward wind. Kalira noticed Arkov glance back before issuing his own commands. Noticed messengers waiting near Rohan without being told. Noticed fear changing direction. The Iron League had expected a child monarch, a divided court, a sleeping coast. Instead, it found the coast awake and somewhere in the storm. Enemy officers began asking a question their maps could not answer. Who is commanding Vareth? The answer arrived in blood and rain when the second wave struck. Not gliders this time, but siege walkers climbing the cliff face on magnetic claws. Enormous black machines with cannon mouths glowing green. Too heavy for nets, too armored for coastal guns. The operations room shook as the first walker reached the upper road and fired. Destroying a wind tower in a blossom of fire, Arkov ordered heavy batteries forward. Rowan said, "No." Arkov snapped, "Prisoner." "I am done gambling." Rowan pointed at the map. "Their armor faces the road, their bellies face the sea." "Drop the road," Kalira stared. "The road carries our retreat." Rowan said, "It carries their advance. Choose what you need more." The room waited. Arkov looked at Kalira, and she understood this was the moment rulers became more than signatures. "Blow the road," she ordered. Charges thundered along the cliff highway. Stone split. The old imperial road, pride of 3 dynasties, collapsed beneath the walkers. For one breath, the machines hung in rain, claws screaming against empty air. Then they fell backward into the Black Sea, still firing at clouds as waves swallowed them. Cheers erupted, but Rowan did not cheer. He watched the northern map. Eyes narrowing, Kalira followed his gaze. The Red Army at Illyrian Pass had begun moving. Not forward, backward retreat, Arkov said. We broke their plan. Rowan's face hardened. No. They are uncovering what stood behind them. The pass map flickered, mountains blooming with new red lights, hidden signatures rising from beneath snow. Not infantry, not walkers, orbital range launchers. Dozens of them aimed not at forts, not at armies, but at the capital. Then the night stopped being a battle and became an execution countdown. Asterisk, the Iron League had placed siege lances under the northern snow while everyone watched the false army. Once charged, they could fire over the horizon and crack the palace shields, the reservoirs, the civilian quarter, the Imperial Hospital, all in one coordinated strike. Arkov's triumph collapsed into horror. Our army is east. The pass garrison cannot reach them. Kalira said, How long? A young officer answered. 12 minutes to full ignition. Maybe less. The room spun around Kalira, advisors shouting. Commanders demanding impossible redeployments. Sierra calling air support that would arrive too late. And in the center of it all, Rowan went still. Not shocked, not afraid. Still. As if some door inside him had opened onto an older field. He reached for the command rail, stopped because of the tracker, and looked at Kalira. If you want your capital alive, remove the restraint, Sierra barked. Highness, no. Arkov turned. This is madness. Kalira looked at the red lights, at 12 minutes. At the prisoner she had bought under a slave moon. What do you need, she asked. Rowan's answer came without hesitation. Full command channel, uncensored map. Authority over artillery, signal corps, civilian grid, and any pilot who still loves this planet more than procedure. Maravin, who had slipped into the back of the operations room during the battle, shouted, You cannot hand the Empire to a purchased human. Rowan looked at him then, and every word came quiet. She is not handing me the Empire. She is lending me the battlefield. Kalira removed the tracker herself. The metal opened around Rowan's wrist with a soft click that sounded louder than artillery. He rolled his shoulders once, not like a freed slave tasting liberty, but like a commander accepting weight. Then he stepped to the command rail, touched the living map with both hands, and the room changed. It was not magic, not really, but later soldiers would speak of it that way. Rowan's voice dropped into a cadence older than rank. Battery 4, fire on your own abandoned signal tower. Now, harbor grid, kill lights in sectors 7 through 12. Leave the hospital beacon burning, air wing blue. Climb above storm ceiling and cut engines on my mark. Signal corps. Open civilian emergency bands and tell every household to shelter west walls only, not basements. Pass garrison. Do not attack the lances. Paint them. Artillery cannot kill what it cannot see. Arkov stared, then began repeating orders when officers hesitated. Because disbelief had become a luxury none could afford. Across the map, Varath moved. Batteries fired at empty towers, creating ion bursts that bent enemy targeting beams. Harbor lights died, confusing orbital calibration. Civilian shelters shifted by neighborhood. Pilots climbed into lethal weather on trust alone. The first siege lance ignited, and Rowan whispered, Mark. Blue wing cut engines and dropped through the storm like stones. Not firing missiles, only releasing reflective chaff stolen from festival stores. The lance beams struck the falling mirror clouds, fragmented and tore harmless scars across the ocean. 3 more lances fired, 2 missed, 1 struck an empty cliff road. The capital screamed, but it lived. No noble in that room breathed until the human gave them permission with the next order. Rowan did not stop. For 9 minutes he ruled every sound in the operations room. He turned fishing fleets into signal mirrors, hospital drones into decoy stars, old rebellion cannons into bunker killers, temple bells into timing relays, and once, impossibly, ordered palace musicians to play a battle hymn over public speakers because the rhythm matched the reload cycle. He needed civilian volunteers to follow while opening storm shutters. Kalira watched officers who had mocked him run to obey him. Watched General Arkov's pride dissolve into discipline. Watched Captain Sira smile once when a lance battery vanished under Royal artillery. Watched Meravin retreat farther into the shadows as the human he wanted caged became the center of gravity. The Iron League launched its final barrage with 6 lances at once. Rowan responded by ordering the eastern reservoir gates open toward the sea. Arkov shouted. "That floods the lower gardens," Rowan said. "It creates a steam wall. Do it." Kalira shouted before anyone else could argue. The gates opened. Cold reservoir water struck burning lance fragments in coastal fire. Steam rose over the capital in a white mountain. Enemy targeting failed, beams scattered, 2 lances overloaded. One exploded under the snow with a light so bright it painted the northern mountains bone white. The last launcher tried to cycle again, and Rowan leaned close to the map. Voice softer, almost intimate. "Pass garrison, Captain Ivo. You have 1 shot. Wait until the vent opens." Ivo's distant voice crackled. "I cannot see the vent," Rowan answered. "You can. You were just looking for a target instead of a wound. Wait for the breath." There was silence. Then Ivo fired. The last red light vanished. The operations room erupted. Not in celebration at first, but in disbelief, trying to become sound. Rowan stepped back from the rail, swayed once, and only Kalira noticed how white his knuckles had gone, how his breath dragged against old injuries. He had commanded like a god for 9 minutes, and now he looked again like a tired man in borrowed clothes. The northern attack was broken. The eastern invasion captured, the capital alive, and by any sane measure, the night should have ended there. But treason loves the moment after victory. When people lower blades and open doors, Meravon made his move before dawn. He entered the relief chamber with 12 house soldiers, all wearing royal medic badges, and shot General Arkov through the shoulder before anyone understood they were not healers. Kalia was shoved behind the command rail by Sira. Alarms began again, and Rowan, who had not slept, turned with the weary expression of a man insulted by repetition. Meravon held a pistol to the throat of the chief signal officer. His court rings replaced by a black command band. House Thornvale's emergency seal glowing on his sleeve. "Enough," he said. "The princess is clearly compromised. Bewitched by a Terran war criminal, unfit to rule. By authority of the Preservation Compact, I will assume regency until the Empress courts decide." Kalira stood, fury cutting through exhaustion. "There is no Preservation Compact," Meravin smiled. "There will be. Once the archives are corrected." Sira raised her pistol. 12 rifles turned on her. Rowan moved 1 step, and every rifle turned on him. Meravin laughed. "Ah, there he is. The purchased miracle. Tell me, human." "Do you know why I wanted you contained?" Rowan said. "Because cowards fear witnesses." "Because I know what you are," Meravin snapped. He lifted a data slate. And the main display filled with an old Terran war portrait. Younger face, same gray eyes, uniform dark with ash. Rank marks like a row of captured suns. Kalira felt the room inhale. Meravon's voice rang with triumph. "Rowan Vale? Not infantry, not prisoner, not ordinary animal. Former High Marshal of the Terran Expeditionary Defense, architect of the Soul Breakwater, commander at Cardalin, Voss Rift, Red Meridian, in the Siege of 9 Moons. The man who ruled battlefields so completely that enemy empires surrendered when his banner entered orbit. The empire had purchased a prisoner, but the prisoner had once worn war like a crown." Kalira looked from the image to Rowan, waiting for denial. None came. Only a tired sadness settled over him, as if the portrait were a dead friend being displayed for entertainment. Meravin continued. "After the armistice, he vanished. Wanted by 6 powers, hated by thousands, feared by millions, and you brought him into our palace? You gave him command. You endangered every citizen under that legendary butcher." Rowan did not defend himself, and somehow that hurt Kalira more than any accusation. Captain Sira whispered. High Marshal Arkov, bleeding but conscious, stared with something between awe and betrayal. Kalira forced herself to speak. "Is it true?" Rowan answered. "Some of it, the battles, yes, the butcher. Depends who wrote the memorials. Maravan pressed the pistol harder against the signal officer's throat. Enough poetry, Highness? Order him to his knees. Or I will begin killing loyal servants until your new monster remembers he is chained. Kalia raised her chin. You no longer hold his chains. Maravan smiled. No, but she does. He nodded toward the chamber doorway. And two soldiers dragged in a small figure. The kitchen apprentice from the market flight. No, not a kitchen apprentice, Kalia realized. One of the evacuated fishing children from the eastern cliffs. Terrified, wrists bound, Maravan had taken civilians from the shelters. He put his second pistol against the child's head. Neil Marshall Rowan's face changed. Not with fear for himself, but with a grief so old it seemed bottomless. He lowered himself to one knee. Maravan enjoyed that too much, which was his final error. Rowan kneeling was not surrender. It was mathematics. His hand touched the floor. Fingers spreading near a pool of water from the flooded garden pipes. His eyes moved once to Kyalira, once to Sira, once to the child. And Kyalira suddenly understood that command did not always sound like orders. Sometimes it was a glance that trusted you to become brave in time. She stepped forward, Maravan. Let the child go. Your argument is with me. Maravan's attention flicked toward her. Exactly as Rowan needed, Sira fired first. Not at a soldier. At the ceiling sprinkler line Rowan had glanced at. Water burst over the chamber. Lights flickered. And Rowan's hand slammed the floor. Current from a broken command rail leaping through the water in a blue sheet. Not enough to kill. Enough to lock armor joints for half a second. Half a second was human country. Rowan surged from his knee. Caught the child by the back of the coat and threw him sliding behind Kalira. Then he moved through Maravan's soldiers like a storm that had studied anatomy, elbow to visor, knee to breathing joint. Palm to nerve cluster, stolen rifle flipped into staff. Every strike chosen to end motion without wasting death. Sira took two. Arkov tripped one with his good arm. Kalira pulled the child behind the rail and fired her small pistol at Maravan's black command band. The shot cracked the device. Maravan screamed. Rowan reached him before the scream ended. Caught both wrists and looked into his face. Do not make me become the story you told about me. Maravan spat. Monster. Rowan's voice went quiet. I have been worse. That is why you should stop. Maravan drew a hidden blade from his sleeve. Rowan broke his wrist and lowered him to the floor with almost gentle disgust. When the traitor finally begged, the human did not smile. Asterisk, that mercy became the most frightening thing in the room. Maravan sobbed threats, then offers, then names. House Thornvale, Iron League envoys, court archivists, finance ministers. A whole web spilling from him as medics bound his shattered wrist, and Sira tied his mouth shut to preserve everyone else's patience. Kalira listened, cold and clear, while Rowan sat on the floor beside the rescued child. Teaching him how to breathe slowly through panic, the portrait still glowed on the display. High Marshal Rowanvale looking down on prisoner Rowanvale, two ghosts, divided by years and chains. Kalira approached him only when the room was secure. You could have told me. She said. He nodded. Yes. Why did you not? Because when people know what I commanded, they stop asking who I am. They speak to the rank, or the rumor, or the fear, not the man. She looked at the old portrait. Did you rule battlefields? Rowan was silent for a long time. Then he said, No one rules a battlefield, Highness. We pretend we do so. Soldiers will believe someone understands the horror. I was good at pretending. You saved the capital tonight. She said. He glanced toward the wounded, the frightened child, the exhausted officers. I saved a city by knowing how others would try to destroy it. That is not clean. It is still saving, Kalira said. His eyes met hers, and she saw, beneath all that restraint, a man who had been praised for victories that kept him awake, blamed for choices that had no innocent version, and finally sold his cargo because the galaxy feared what it had once begged him to become. Morning came bruised and gold over Vareth Prime. The capital did not celebrate with fireworks because too many roofs were broken, too many families counted missing hours. Too many soldiers stood beside prisoners who had tried to kill them and wondered what justice could carry. but bells rang, slow and stubborn. From the sea temples, then from the hill shrines. Then from the palace towers, Kalira stood on the eastern balcony, with soot on her sleeves and no crown because the crown had been left. Somewhere in the operations room during Maravan's coup. Below, fishing families returned to wet streets, and House Thornvale banners were lowered from 3 ministry halls without ceremony. Rowan stood beside her because she had ordered the locks removed from his quarters and because he had ignored the medics until Syrah threatened to carry him. Kalira said, "The council wants to try you for entering command illegally." He gave a faint, tired smile. "They are welcome to stand in line." She turned toward him, and Earth has requested your immediate return with full honors. His smile vanished. "They found me. You saved a capital on every open band. Rohan, half the system heard you command." He looked out over the sea. "I was trying to be dead," Kalira answered softly. "You were very bad at it," he almost laughed, which felt like a greater victory than breaking siege lances. Kalira held out the ownership writ, the ugly legal document that had begun everything. Its edges were bent, stained with rain and smoke. She tore it down the center, then again, and let the pieces fall into the wind. "By royal decree, Rowan Vale, you are not property, not asset. Not prisoner of the Sapphire Crown. You are free under my protection until you choose where to go." Rowan watched the fragments scatter, expression unreadable. "Freedom," he said, as if the word belonged to another species. "Yes," Kalira said. "You may leave when your wounds permit." He looked at her then. "Why would you ask me to stay?" She thought of the auction platform, the trader guards, the coast, the lances, Maravan's pistol, the child breathing because Rowan had knelt at the right moment. "Because my empire is full of people who think command means ownership, and I need someone near me who knows command is responsibility." Rowan looked away first, which told her the answer had reached him. "I am not safe to build a reign around, Highness," Kalira smiled sadly. "Neither is the court, but at least you admit it." In the weeks that followed, the truth spread faster than any decree. The actual man spent most mornings drilling coastal militia in how to retreat without shame. Afternoons advising Kalira, on which noble smiles hid logistical impossibilities. Evenings, sitting alone by the western tower window with tea, he often forgot to drink. Children from the eastern cliffs called him Mr. Rowan, in that he answered every time Kalira noticed. Because she noticed him now, but as a person made of choices. Some days he was patient, some days distant. Some nights he woke the barracks by shouting coordinates from wars no one else had survived. And Kalira learned that legends limped in private. That victory could be a wound with banners around it. That HFY did not mean humans felt no fear. It meant they carried fear into the dark and came back with someone else alive. 3 months after the auction, the Iron League sent a formal surrender delegation. They arrived in silver armor, faces stiff with ritual contempt, expecting a princess softened by youth and a court eager for compromise. Instead, they found Kalia on the tribunal throne, Captain Syrah at her right, General Arkoff at her left, with his arm still in a sling. Witnesses from the coast seated in public rows, and Rowan standing behind the throne in plain black. No chains, no medals, no crown of war. The League ambassador began with threats disguised as offers. Reparations reduced in exchange for mutual silence. Border adjustments in exchange for stability. Prisoner swaps excluding those who could testify. Kalira listened until the performance bored her. Then she said, "You aimed siege lances at civilian hospitals." The ambassador smiled thinly. War creates regrettable angles. Rowan leaned forward and placed one finger on the treaty table. "No, it creates choices." The ambassador looked at him for the first time. Irritation becoming recognition, becoming dread. "High Marshal Vale." Rowan said, "Retired." The ambassador's throat moved. "The League was informed you were dead." Rowan nodded. "I was enjoying the rumor, Kalira. Let silence do its work." Rowan did not threaten them. He did not need to. Kalira slid the surrender terms across the table. Full confession, reparations to the coast, public exchange of prisoners, dismantling of northern lancefields, Independent witness access. The ambassador tried to laugh. Rowan looked at him with tired eyes. You have 3 choices. Accept the princess's mercy. Test her army, or test my memory, the ambassador signed before sunset. That was how the galaxy learned Princess Kalira had not bought a weapon. She had freed a warning. Years later, historians would argue over the purchase at Orinth. They would write that buying Rowan Vale changed the war, changed the court, changed the empire. But Kalira always corrected them when she had patience. I did not buy him, she would say. I bought the right to stop someone else from using him. After that, he chose, and Rowan, older, quieter, still plain in black, while younger officers wore decorations bright enough to blind satellites, would pretend not to hear. He remained near her through the Thornvale trials. He never took a throne, never wore the martial stars again, never allowed anyone to call him ruler of battlefields without answering. Battlefields are not ruled, they are survived. But in the darkest councils, when enemies gathered beyond maps and ministers began to tremble, Kalira would look to the ordinary human once sold under a slave moon, and he would study the board with those patient gray eyes, seeing roads, weather, fear, hunger, pride, lies, the small details that decided whether cities lived. Then he would speak softly and armies would move. And whenever arrogant powers asked why the sapphire crown had become so difficult to kill, veterans told them the truth in low voices. The princess had once gone to a market and purchased a chained human prisoner. Believing she had saved one broken man from an arena, she discovered instead that chains can hold wrists but not history, collars can burn skin but not command. And the galaxy's most dangerous humans are not the ones hungry to conquer, but the ones who have seen enough conquest to hate it. Rowan Vale had ruled battlefields only in the sense that fire rules a forest, by knowing how it spreads, by fearing what it consumes, by choosing where to stand when everyone else runs. Kalira gave him freedom, and he gave her empire a spine. Because, in a corridor full of betrayal, a princess had looked at a prisoner and seen a person before she saw a weapon. That was the secret no enemy understood until too late. Humanity did not become terrifying because it loved war. Humanity became terrifying because even after war crowned its survivors with ash. Some humans still chose mercy, still chose children over victory, still chose witnesses over corpses, still chose to kneel so the innocent could live. And if such a human ever rose again, if the quiet one in plain black stepped toward the map, if his tired eyes found the hidden road your army thought no one could see, then every wise commander in the stars knew the only order left worth giving. Stand down, because the battlefield had remembered its ruler. And this time, he was fighting for someone who had set him free.